Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre, and today I am joined by the brilliant Ryan Borochovitz, one of our co-artistic producers. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Jill. How are you?
I'm doing all right as well. Thank you very much. Today, Ryan and I have the absolute honor to discuss and unpack and dig into the shed of The Fixing Girl. So this is a show that's happening right now on the Ada Slate stage at Young People's Theatre. It is written by Kevin Dyer and directed by Stephen Colella. It's a three-hander, and it's happening right now until May 2nd. So before we really get into this emotionally wrought, beautiful piece, let's go through our normal icebreaker. Ryan, what are you sipping on with us today?
I'll actually let you go first because mine riffs slightly off of yours. What's in your cup today? And what is your ensemble? Because I know you want to talk about it.
Okay, so I feel like this isn't, we're going to get into some of this with Synopsis, but this is a piece that kind of centers around grandparents in a way. That's, I guess, all I'll say at the top. So all of my things today are bringing in a piece of my grandparents. So all of my biological grandparents have passed away. Two that I was very close with passed away during university, during theater school. So we'll get into it, but this piece of theater really hit home on multiple levels. So to start, the sweatshirt I'm wearing is my nanny's. So nanny is what I call my grandma on my mom's side. This was her favorite sweatshirt. It still smells like her. And yeah, I called dibs on getting this sweatshirt when she passed. This is like my comfort sweatshirt too, when I need like a dose of home or to kind of go back to my inner child days, because this particular grandparent nanny I was the closest with. We would tell make-believe stories together. We would hang out in our backyard, and which consists of my grandpa's two sheds. Like, again, we're going to get into a lot of ways that this piece just really, really, really took me back. So yeah, so this sweatshirt was my nanny's. And then I'm drinking tea today out of my grandpa's teapot. So this teapot existed at my grandparents' house. And there's memories of my grandpa actually like putting this teapot on the stove for us. It's orange pico tea because that's the tea that we would drink. Yeah, so you'll see me kind of filling up my cup as the episode goes along. And then the cup that I'm using is a little piece of china from my grandma on my dad's side, her china set that each granddaughter got one of her teacups when she passed away. So that's holding my orange pico. So I wasn't terribly close with my dad's dad, so my grandpa on that side. So these three items, the teacup, the teapot, and the sweatshirt are really commemorating the three grandparents I was closest with. And also I have water because hydration station, and it's in a mason jar because also nanny and grandpa on my mom's side, an activity that I would do with my mom and both of them. So again, this generational sort of activity, we would can tomatoes in mason jars. So my water is in a mason jar. I also have a pack of Kleenex on my desk today because this recording can go many ways. So that's my accoutrement. Ryan, again, icebreaker, what are you sipping on and what's your vibe?
So I'm happy to have let you go on first because you went all out on this one. I don't have anywhere near the same amount of sentimental tokens, but I wanted you to introduce the teapot because you poured me a nice cup from that very teapot, which I have here in the cup. There you go. That's the show you're watching right now. I have some of your nanny's tea, or your grandpa's tea, I guess, in it. So we're going to talk about grandpas and grandparents. And I was waving it on the screen, but I also have a Kleenex handy because, yeah, this is quite the show.
Yeah. So Ryan, I guess, do you want to kind of take us down this memory lane synopsis?
Okay. Whew. Let's hope I can do this.
I'll sub in if need be. I'll come in through the window and help you out and offer an emotional verbal hug.
Man, you are bringing in the references to the show that we have yet to describe. You got this. Anyone who already watched the show listening to this is getting a kick out of all of these. This is great. So, okay, The Fixing Girl.
Getting a catapult out of all of these. Marshmallows, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, The Fixing Girl is a beautiful hauntingly beautiful play oriented for children. It's at YPT, which is a youth-oriented theater company, but this is a play for 100% all ages. In the interest of a non-spoiler plot summary, I'm trying to think which part where I want to stop this, because non-spoiling this will be interesting. And why I say that is because this is a piece that if you are an adult watching it, you will understand what's happening pretty much instantaneously, even though it does play a little fast and loose, but it also doesn't think it's outsmarting anybody. It knows what you know. It knows that you know what it knows. But I think for a lot of kids watching it, there will be a lot of discovery moments throughout. But so I kind of, there's different ways that audiences will receive information from this that changes what is or is not a spoiler, I guess. But what I will say in the least possible spoiler version of this is that our main character is a young girl named Megan, who is played by Ebony Lee, and she is very sad and angry at her mom, and she locks herself into her granddad's shed, which is this delightfully whimsical, thrifted Pee-wee's Playhouse of an environment that has all kinds of junk and doodads and who's-its and what's-its galore all over the place. Possibly he's a hoarder, or maybe he's just somebody who likes collecting things so he can have a fun activity to do.
It's just a grandpa, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The space doesn't feel like overwhelmingly cluttered, like, oh my God, her grandpa wasn't okay, but there is a lot of things that might be labeled junk all over the place. But she and her granddad love doing crafts and activities and building and fixing things. He's left her behind this chalkboard of various tasks that need to get fixed, and he trusts her to see these through. And in her anger at her mother, Megan has locked herself in this room and she's angry at her mom. She's angry at her granddad, but she loves her granddad more than anything. And she's systematically going through this list of things to fix that he's left her. And okay, I'm already started. Yeah. And she monologues to the audience. She tells us about her relationship to her granddad. There's a lot of really interesting uses of the various items. There's a lot of, I guess, Robert Lepage inspired projection devices done through this. There's a one moment where she has this low down pointing camera where we can see her hands fixing a lava lamp, and we see that live streamed directly onto the screen. There's a lot of interesting stuff used with various projections and screens. We can get more into them post spoiler, but yeah, it's about her thinking through her relationship to her granddad and dealing with this deep sadness within her in a very mature and profound and, heart-rending way that a lot of people listening can probably already guess where this is going, but I will stop the synopsis there for the interest of people, possibly children, who maybe are completely unsure where that would be. Go see this show. This show is, I'm not going to swear on this because kids might be watching, but this show is bleeping brilliant. Yeah.
Yes.
It is one gut punch after another. Again, it's not because it's tricking you or twisting in any meaningful way. Most people our age and older watching it will certainly have figured out what's going on earlier. But with that knowledge, it just gets you and gets you. And every time you think you've reached the emotional climax, but wait, there's more. And bring tissues to this one, because it is something special. And we will get into more detail. But anything you want to add to synopsis or general appraisal?
Yeah. Also, great synopsis. You made it through. Definitely bring Kleenex. I was absolutely sobbing, blipping onto my shirt the whole time. And I think you said it perfectly, Ryan. This piece, you were just because it's imperfectly perfect. Even the way in the writing, it's not a piece of theater that's tied up like a bow in this is theater doing the theater thing. It's a very raw and quirky, literal slice of life, like a slice of bread, like the toast. And I think that's also what kept gut punching the audience is we're in this sort of cluttered shed. And I think the form of the piece definitely displays that, the way, you mentioned Meg throughout kind of gives us little monologues about her time shared with her granddad, or the way she feels in this moment, or when she's passionate about the things that she's fixing. And we kind of just weave back and forth wherever her brain or heart, however her brain or heart wants to open up. And it's like, it marries exactly sort of like the setting or where we are, this like cluttered shed where like you open a drawer and it's this, but you might think it's that or whatever. And so I think it's like, there's like this, like I said, like imperfectly perfect lack of like theater norm form that this piece throws humans watching this in a very human environment, that you're inside the shed with all of the characters from the very beginning. You're not in a theater anymore. And to the point, like that pays off at the end when, again, I won't get into specifics, I guess, but like the audience has a moment where we're genuinely cheering as if like we are these characters' best friends. And again, I think I want to praise in both Kevin's writing and also Stephen's direction. And obviously, Zoe Doyle, who plays Mom, Eponine Lee, who plays Megan, and Eric Peterson played Granddad. All of these actors absolutely lifted the heck out of the writing and the directing of what I'm about to mention. But I think it's the understanding that Stephen has about the writing that Kevin has gifted us with, like that marriage of that team sort of like put on stage like a masterpiece of memory and nostalgia that just kept opening up, and every single person in that theater either specifically or genuinely or generally could relate to, whether it's you have a memory with a grandparent, or even like you said, the usage of media, like there was projection, there's like, again, we're not in spoiler territory yet, but there's like some 90s or early 2000 electronic throwbacks that are kind of opened up, or so again, it's like this sense of nostalgia that, not a lot of theater pieces necessarily have that as a theme, right? Of like, I think a big theme of this play is audience nostalgia, which is really interesting because it's like, yeah, again, it's such an invitation of the audience as a cast member, definitely for this piece. And so I just think, yeah, it was what a wonderful, collection of moments and relatability across the board. Also, just as kind of like a peek into the audience, I won't say peek behind the curtain. Ryan and I, we went on opening night. We are recording the following morning, letting some of that fresh sunlight in, which is great. But we were sitting with a lot of people on the artistic team. Like we were sitting, it just happened to be where our tickets were. And actually, Stephen and Kevin were sitting right in front of us. And our set and costume designer, Anna Truce, I believe, apologies, Anna, if I'm mispronouncing that, was behind us. There was like a student who worked on the production was beside us. So we were also in this little cove of parts that worked on this piece, and having like Stephen and Kevin sitting in front of us and like us hearing the jokes and hearing the moments and organically reacting. But like, I definitely felt that force field of like energy of humans that worked on this piece. Like, or I felt like that was a really special place for us to be able to sit and sort of bear witness to these artists bearing witness to the work that they made. Yeah. Wow. It's kind of all coming out, not the specifics yet, but please go see the show. Cause as you said, Brian, like this is absolutely for kids. And I kind of want to tip my hat to Herbie Barnes and YPT for putting a lot of shows this season are going there. They're not, it's shows that are crafted for youth and for children, but they aren't worried about pandering to what they think, how they think the child will react to a piece. It's strong, hard-hitting, emotional theater. And I think it's lovely to see that a company like YPT is completely trusting their demographic, their audience of youth, to watch these shows and have their opinion or feel things or relate to things. Because I think that it can sometimes be a pitfall in TYA, is especially the adults making it, think they need to sort of dumb it down or make it palatable for children. So we think we have to sort of infuse it with this artificial magic. And, in order for the kids to, we don't want to go too far. We don't want to topple them over too far. But I just think, I want to take a moment to just be like, YPT, thank you for going far. And trusting the kids are going to get something from this, as will the adults, as will the millennials in the audience, as will the grandparents. Like, this is definitely a show for all ages and one of the most inspiring and impacting shows on our Toronto stages right now. So go see it. You have until May 2nd, the 8 Slate stage. Should we go into spoiler zones?
I think we should.
Okay, great.
I'll lend you my hands, and together we will
tie the knot on the first part of the episode. And now we have a little knot showing up on the screen as our spoiler shield. So we're in the spoiler zone. The reason why there is a knot, which we can now say, and Granddad, so sailing. And that's a huge sort of hobby of Granddad's that Meg has piqued an interest in. And we sort of get peppered in throughout her monologues throughout the piece. That's a hobby that they did together. That's something that Granddad is, opened up this sort of like oceanic imagination in Meg. And there's a special knot that Granddad, through like a video recording, is trying to show Meg to do. And throughout the story, Meg kind of finds herself in multiple times with 2 pieces of string trying to figure out how to do this knot. And it's not working. And it's that knot in her brain that's already wrought with emotion that she's stuck. It's sort of like a symbol for her being stuck in her grieving her granddad, which I will now kind of say now that we're in spoiler zone.
Yeah.
So Granddad has passed away and Meg is in the shed trying to do what most of us do when we're coping with grieving, is bring things back to normal. Or if I do this, then maybe he'll come back. Or she's in this limbo phase, right? Of it's still too raw to be over with, but anyways, just going back to tie a knot on the knot. So we get this is a recurrent thing. And through a video of her showing her how to do it, or there's like a stage moment where Eric's granddad hands like come behind and actually like help or like offer mimed guidance to have her finally tie this knot. So we really wanted the knot to be the spoiler shield because again, it's such a recurrent, and it's just like the tying the bonds, like Granddad is string A and Meg is string B, and together they'll be tied forever kind of thing. And it's again this passing on of generational knowledge and hobbies to the next generation, and it takes 2 strings to make that knot. Also, the knot, once it's tied, has like an infinity symbol kind of as well. So there's just a lot of stuff we could tie in with the symbol. I feel like I am like doing like a dramaturgical slam poem with this episode. That's just like how my thoughts are coming out. Ryan, do you want to pick up on anything that I've kind of spurted?
So I guess synopsis part 2.
Yeah.
Now that we're post spoiler, again, this is the thing that I feel like isn't a major spoiler for most people watching the show because you'll figure it out very early on, but still letting yourself be on that journey. Yeah, Granddad has passed away. And yet we see him played by a delightful Eric Peterson, Billy Bishop himself, gracing the stage in all of his kooky granddad hilariousness. Mm-hmm. He shows up, he tells jokes, he pontificates on the difference between facts and opinions and guesses, and he's very much still a presence lingering over this play. And the first time he appears, you maybe have already figured out what's going on, but it questions the metaphysics of, is this her perhaps hallucinating him or imagining him, or is this a dream? She kind of falls asleep shortly before it, and you kind of wonder how much of this is dream space. But no, as information is very, not so subtly, but delicately given to us over the course of this piece, and especially the first half of it, we realize that, Granddad is no more, and this piece is essentially a kiddie version of the Elizabeth Kübler-Ross 5 stages of grief, and going through that when you, in addition to having to grieve someone who meant so much to you, but also needing to do it as a child and understanding, really confronting death for the first time and thinking about what does it mean to have this person that means so much to you. Can you hear in my voice then?
Yeah.
Yeah. To have somebody who means so much to you just be gone and not even having to just grapple with, I love this person, they're not here, how do I make sense of that? But also coming to terms with just the finality of life for the first time. And I don't know if this is necessarily textually true. I think there are little hints and cues throughout the piece that Megan is possibly on the spectrum in some way, or a little neurodiverse. Well. And she has, I honestly think this play is a better version of what Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime wants to be, but in my opinion fails to be in a lot of ways. Rant for another episode. But yeah, this is very much, the child trying to make sense of things, confronting the contradictions of life that present her with, while also being legitimately in denial, in anger, bargaining, and it's teetering on depression, but ultimately finding a way to on the road to acceptance, forgiving her granddad for leaving her, forgiving her mom for trying to return to a sense of normalcy while the wounds have not yet healed. It's just, everything about this. And I guess to also just comment on the moment that we alluded to that you described with the hands coming back in. I described this piece as possibly Lepage inspired. And that image, it feels taken right out of a very striking stage image. And though not kid-friendly, Lepage play Needles and Opium, where you also have the one actor's hands behind another actor's body and creating that image, but using it to really tie this knot together. Realizing that he's always there, he's always helping. You learn from the lessons that were imparted to you, even if the physical presence is not there anymore. Oh man, this, and that's not even the big gut punch at the end. That's one of many big gut punches that this show puts on its audience, just one after another. There's even a musical number at one point, which is funny. This show isn't a musical, but when Megan feels like she's completed the list and is happy that now that she's done it, Granddad will come back, she has a very peppy song that is then deflated by the realization that's not how things work. Whoa, so
and
much.
Granddad has the pirate song as well.
Oh, I forgot about the pirate song. Yes, pirates is so much of the thing in here. Oh my god.
So I guess to support and nourish our gut and our heart, the elements of theater. I know I've said this a lot on recent episodes, but the elements of theater at play here are to support all of this were absolutely exquisite. And so I kind of want to talk about to ground our feet a little bit about all of the theatrical, what makes theater at play to support this like mind and heart and soul opening piece of nostalgic theater. So the set. So we enter the space, and like we've mentioned, like this entire piece takes place in Granddad's shed. And again, Anna Troost, who is our set and costume designer, tipping a full hat with a bow. So we walk in, and it's like this is someone you're going to get a peek into Jill's childhood. I loved I Spy books growing up, so much so that like I nannied my little nephew over the pandemic. And even as a baby, I would just go through I Spy books with him and like point out all of the knickknacks. And I just love I Spy books. I loved finding the things, but I also just loved being inside a world of 2 pages of like things and magical clutter and puzzles. So when you walk into the Ada Slate stage, it was like an I Spy page. I was so excited. Like there, like you said, it was thingamabobs. There were so many knickknacks, and even just hearing too, and this is it's even in the text of the piece, but all of the set garnishes that Anna uses, they're all sustainable, reusable props and set pieces. And that's a theme that carries throughout the piece too. So again, YPT, yes, sustainable resources used on the stage. And they were like, I was like looking at in my grandpa's 2 sheds, like there were like old stained paint sticks in a paint jar that's up on a top shelf. There were drawers labeled certain things, but when you open those drawers, they didn't contain the things that were labeled. There, was an old sort of like 1970s locker closet that held like way too many coats. And I'm like, that's exactly what my grandparents' closet looked like. And just like mismatched furniture, because obviously this was probably like a bigger shed. And then okay, now I'm getting into like the tech side of things. So
sorry, before you do, can I comment something on the
please,
set there?
Please.
Since you brought up I Spy books, something that I just thought was very cute is that in Stephen's director's note in the digital program that we have here, he mentioned, I can pull it up here, but that if you look closely at the stage, that there's a brown and gold clock, like antique clock in there that he said came from his own grandparents' collecting. So right off the bat, one, he's prompting us to play an I Spy game with this very, boisterously cluttered stage. And two, that it's not just that, yes, these are all repurposed things, that nothing's going to waste here, but that there is sentimental value built into the items that fill this. It's not just, oh yeah, we need something, here's a clock. It's right off the bat we get, oh my God, yes, it's just so much love and tenderness and care went into all of this, not just in like the brilliance of the design, but just making every little piece of it matter, which I think is just, sorry, you want to talk more about tech, but I just wanted to slip that in there.
So like, I think the set really does show this, like a lot of peering into granddad's generation, right? Mm-hmm. And that whole, like, this is his space. But then when Meg enters, we have, right, the third generation coming in, and then it's through her passion and interaction with the space that we get like her generation of stuff. So now I'm kind of segueing us into video and sound design, because this sort of old nostalgic space now has Bluetooth operated projectors, but still also the like early 2000 projectors with like the clear
acetate,
pages.
acetate
pages. There's a VHS, but again, there's like this special camera that is set up where we get to see Meg like work on things, and that's projected. There's a memory stick that goes into a laptop. So again, it's like video designer was Joshua Hind and sound designer Olivia Wheeler, because we'll talk more about other sounds too. But I just like, what a cascade of sort of like technological representation of generations that is inside of this shed. Like, not only do you have granddad's knickknacks that some of them probably passed on from his parents or grandparents, but now we have all of these like electronic doodads that are sharing in the space. And again, we're back to an I Spy book where you open it and you're like, why is there like a wooden rocking horse, but then like a spaceship on the next page? We're like, okay, I guess they just exist in the same swirly orbit. Everyone knows what page I'm talking about. So again, like and the execution of projections, and there was a lot of live dialogue that kind of went, like the projections were a scene partner as well. And again, just like tipping my hat to the actors that interacted with the projections, and that marrying the energy of the projection with the energy of what's going to be live on stage. As someone I've worked with projections before, like that can be hard. That can be hard to land. And they did it. They did it flawlessly. Yeah. So that's another amazing sort of theatrical that's kind of holding the space for us. So yeah, I guess, do you want to talk about a little bit about the video design? Or
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of it. Again, like the generations. There's a very funny line in there about how if the VCR is from the Stone Age, the acetate projector is from the prehistoric dinosaur age. But the way that it was, this very nice marriage of the old tech and the new tech. That this is the coming together of the grandparent with the granddaughter. Yeah. I don't even know if it's framed necessarily like this in the text itself, but it's like they're learning from each other, that she gets the old things from him and he updates them from her, or it's whether or not that's actually textually the case in it. I think it just, as a visual metaphor, really suits it well. And they played with it beautifully. The one part of it that I think maybe wasn't even necessarily bad, it was just maybe a little needlessly distracting, is that there was a projection up above that wasn't the same as, it wasn't one of the like diegetic projections that she's playing with in there. They used it anytime they talked about the bird, another YPT play with freeing a bird who's been injured. I fancy that. But But yeah, that one I found it was maybe just like because it was so much higher than everything else. Anytime you noticed something like the waves or the bird was happening on there, you kind of had to like look high up and it sort of distracted. And sometimes there was things happening on that screen and this screen all at the same time that was a little too much. And I rarely found that what was going on that screen was interesting or different enough to be worth stealing away some of the attention from the very interesting things that were happening down below. I think they
Sure,
could
yeah.
have some of like the bird and wave effects could have been done with sound design more so than with needing to
Right.
have that additional projection, especially when she's doing her little projected puppet show of what goes on the boat and she's creating
Mhm.
her own wave effects with that. I don't know if we also needed additional wave effects up above. It's not a major critique against the overall very brilliant use of projection in this piece, but
True.
it kind of, I guess, reached a point of diminishing returns for me, and there was enough else going on that I don't know if we needed that particular element. But I
Yeah,
don't want to be
fair.
negative because the show is so great. Continue.
Yeah. Yeah, just to kind of mention that too. When I first saw, so there was like three rectangular panels
Mhm.
that were kind of like what Ryan's saying, like they were kind of dangling like in near the top of the set, like honestly just beyond the set. And yeah, I caught myself throughout the piece like peering up there when we'd have like a crow fly by or like the waves. But it was kind of like outside the ether of the world of the play. Like I think especially because we're immediately invited into the shed, like you don't want to leave, similar to Meg. And so, yeah, I would agree with you, like popping up too. But I will say visually, again, as we walked into the space and I was like, ooh, an I Spy page, those three panels to me, and knowing there was three humans in this story, like again, and I think they were like subtly different sizes too. I thought that
Mm.
was a really cool, like initial image of like three generations. It also kind of, to me, gave like garage door panel vibes. So, and the fact that they were constantly suspended, it also was that welcoming of like maybe granddad's shed has a garage door and like that's open, but it's open above because we know that Meg locks the door so that mom can't come in. But the fact that on the other side of things, the garage door image for me was open, that was like to me like an open invitation of like the fourth wall does not exist. We are inside through that garage. Like that's a
Interesting. Yeah.
like a
No, that
huge deep dive into those panels.
no, that's
But
honestly
that's
a
just
great.
kind of what I yeah.
Yeah, it's honestly a great point that I hadn't considered. Like, I just, yeah, on its own, because there was just so much really well used projection here. And even the things that showed up on that screen were
Yeah.
like very well designed. I just, yeah, it seemed like it was maybe just, it seemed like, oh no, do we have enough projection in the show? Let's add more when it was already
Yeah.
very serviceable with what it had before, where without that.
Agreed.
Mhm.
I guess too, like as I'm sort of baking this thought now too, like if this is like the garage panels for me at least,
Mhm.
a lot of the projections that were happening on that bottom panel were like of the crow or of the waves. So like maybe perhaps to justify that is like the that's also projecting what's going on in the world outside of the shed. Like we
Yeah.
have, like a lot of like yeah, like
I,
nature stuff that we hear in the shed and we see it on the
yeah.
shed garage
And
door.
And I
Yeah.
will say, in the spirit of gut punch after gut punch in the show, like I think there's a really great payoff to the use of that when we see the crow or the bird up there so often, and then in the one of the final images, it flies free off of there and then
Mhm.
shows up projected onto the psych, which is really like it was boxed in and now it's free and it can
Yeah.
fly on into the great. I just don't know if as in a show that's already filled with oomph moments, even if that did become an oomph moment in its own right, I don't know if it was enough of one to justify a somewhat lackluster use of that particular part of the projection design for the entirety of it, especially since there were moments, like I said, where that projection distracts from some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to also talk about the sort of layers of we've talked a lot about how we're inside the shed and the shed very much is like center to downstage. That is the play space. But outside of the shed and then upstage right before the psych, we do have the stairs going up into the house that Mum and Meg live in. And Zoe Doyle plays Mum. That's a lot of her track is walking from the house down those stairs to the outside of the shed. And it's not till the end of the piece that she actually opens up the window and gets in there, gets into the shed. But I really liked how simple that sort of like space that, because like I said, the focus is the shed. That is, the focus is Meg and granddad. But mom is just as important, if not more so, for this character beyond the play's trajectory. Again, thinking as an actor, I always think of who's the character before and who's the character after, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just thought that I really loved how simple, like Stephen and Anna being the set designer, like kept that space between shed and sky, or, you know, downstage and psych, because it literally was just like, we didn't see what the house looked like. We didn't need to see what the house looked like. We just saw sort of almost like silhouetted steps that mom would walk down, go to the outside of the shed, try to speak to Meg, and then walk back up. And that's all we needed. And it's because it was such this like simple shell of space. It also, to me, represented a lot of that space of grief.
Yeah.
Where, like, you know, you have to get to point A to point B, but it is this like shell of darkness that you don't know how you're going to get in. Like, the door might be locked, or you can't open the window, and you walk down those steps and you walk up those steps. But it's a line that mom has at the end where she's like, I don't want to go back to that lonely house anymore. Like, I just love that they left that space so lonely. Because then it's when Meg talks about how she gets from the shed to the house, how she normally gets it. And she maps out specifically, it's through this many steps of my feet, or through hopping on my left leg. And as we sort of, she's still frustrated and she's still sad as the piece ends, but we see her through the memories of her granddad and through knowing that she needs her mom to help her to the next steps of the journey in this sort of dark space. Like, one of my favorite moments that is like forever going to be in me is when we like see her hopping with the one leg. Like, she's trying her best to put her best foot forward. Like, it's an element of Meg that we get to see is starting to exist beyond this shed. And I think that's so important when, like, we're grieving. We do find our areas of comfort, and we live in memories, and we hug ourselves and do whatever we need to do. But you do have to eventually go back out in the world. And the fact that she's already sort of hopping to the next step in that space. Oh, it was just, wow.
And I guess something I'll even add to that is because it was something that this play does so well is it really, like I mentioned, the Kübler-Ross 5 stages of grief before. And what I think is interesting is that psychological theory, and I'm no psychologist, I don't know if that's been like contested or refined in more recent years. It's sort of just like the pop psychology template of this is how people deal with grief. But in theory, what that is essentially a way to flatten the experience of grief, that through meticulous psychological research, we've determined that everybody does this. Our experiences are all the same. And it's just a sequence of observable, definable, communicatable steps that you will go through, and then you'll feel better. And what I think this show does so well is, even though it is very much enacting a sequence of that nature, not refuting it by any means, but it does really attest to the complicated nature of the ways that different people grieve and the lack of uniformity between this, something that's kind of flies in the face of a model that tries to make it uniform the way we grieve. Because she mentioned so many times, like, people who said things during the funeral, which they don't name as a funeral until much later, but you kind of realize what you're listening to early on, where she mentions one uncle who says something about, oh, well, your granddad's with the angels now. And like, she, you know, for a kid's show, it's not afraid to say, no, that's not the case. You know, your specific religious view on what's going on here is your own conjecture, which you're allowed to have, but that's not a helpful thing to tell someone who doesn't believe in that and isn't going to find the same solace in the thing that happens to give you solace. And of course, Megan herself is so frustrated hearing these things. She's frustrated by the fact that there were people laughing at the funeral, not laughing at the death, but, you know, talking as people do at a reception after the funeral and catching up and telling jokes. And she was so mad. Like, these are people who aren't sad. And Mom points out to her that, well, the people who are happy now were sad earlier, just like we will be happy later. Yeah. And like, it's, this show just, it completely gets while still enacting an attempt to recognize that there is not necessarily universal or uniform, but a recognizable pattern of stages through which we can begin to reach acceptance, that there isn't a clear linear path that everybody will follow, that everybody's journey is the same, that the things that give us comfort in one context won't give everyone the same comfort or won't always help us in the same way. It's just, this freaking show.
Also, like in the staging too, to kind of just speak to what a beautiful sort of grieving is not linear. Grieving is, like you said, no one grieves the same. No one person also grieves the same throughout their lives. Like each passing of an individual, each loss, each firing of a job, each whatever, like you're never going to grieve the same, or, and I just think, again, to kind of like as like a macro thing to the list that Meg has on the chalkboard, she doesn't check that off linearly. Like there's so many parts of the entire show where she goes to the list, she checks something off, or she goes to the list and attempts to do something at the bottom of the list. And again, it's like, that is so relatable of like, you try to have this sort of like organized point A, point B, point C, et cetera. And sometimes you just got to pivot and you might not finish the list, or you're scared to tackle that one thing on the list, but that's okay. And so again, having that symbol of, it's not just Meg going through the list chronologically. It's very messy. And I just love that. And just to kind of, sorry, before you go please. In there, another wonderful sort of, again, subtle staging. And this might just be like a happy accident of how the words of the piece and what's required. But there was a lot of unfinished moments in this piece too. Like we see her repairing a thing and then that's done. But like, was it done? Like, and then, or like she makes the train track and then her and mom have this beautiful image of sitting inside the oval of train tracks to eat their toast. But then they're there for like a second and then they peer off. And I remember being like, oh, first being like, that's so interesting. Like they sat in that moment and had that cute little conversation eating their toast, but then they just leave the toast and then walk outside of the circle. And then it was like a delayed gut reaction of like, that is so real, of like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make myself some toast and I'm going to sit down. And then it's something maybe about like the smell of the jam, or you take 3 bites and then you're sick to your stomach and you need to go do something else because eating toast right now, which I thought was going to make me feel happy or bring back good memories, but I can't be inside that circle anymore. And it's just these little things that, again, I think it's just like, well, the text is propelling us to another moment, so let's just move the characters to that moment. But it's once you move to that next moment, this piece did this a lot as a observer, you had that, oh, but wait, but they were just okay, but that's why they moved. Whoa, that's grief. Like that, you need to pivot, you need to shift. Things are gonna be messy. And you can, again, with like the opinions and the facts and the guesses, like you can have things in boxes, you can have things in drawers, but they might not be what they seem, or those boxes might be empty, or like, woof, just.
Or the drawer that's labeled definitely not spoons might be exactly where you look to find a spoon.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, you were going to say something about
it's okay. I wanted to say about that because we were talking about how she checks things off, not necessarily in a linear order. Or the thing that, just to add to that very good observation, is that even though by the end of the play she does accomplish every task on the list, I really love that she doesn't check off the last item. She succeeds at all this. She fixes everything, but you can't fix everything. And it's not that they enact that by leaving something unaccomplished on the list. She still is going to do everything she sets out to do. But I was kind of expecting that when she and her mom exit the shed at the very end, that she was going to be like, oh, wait, we did the marshmallow game, check. But no, that just has remained there, a box unchecked, even if the task itself has been accomplished.
Well, and also just it's like she knows once she checks that list is going to be done, and there's something
Mm-hmm.
like she wants that list to be alive for as long as possible because
Yeah.
that's one of the
And that
last things that she shared with her grandparent, right?
and that last item on the list isn't even something that needs to be fixed. It's once you fix everything, play the marshmallow game, and she can keep doing that. That's
She
not
can
something
keep
that
playing
ever
the
has to be done. Oh my god, this
she can keep
show.
playing the marshmallow game off.
Oh my
Woo!
god. We could
Okay,
talk about this forever, but I think we've been already going a little long. Is there any last thoughts or anything you want to address?
can I just say again to try to ground us?
Mm-hmm.
This teapot I've been pouring, replenishing. This
Mm-hmm.
has been around since I think the 1950s. And can I say the tea in here is still piping hot. So again, reusable sources and thanks, Grandpa, for having passed down this teapot that still keeps your tea hot.
A toast
Um,
to that.
Hey, a toast
Hey.
to that. Wow. Yes, please, everyone, go see this show. Again, this is The Fixing Girl by Kevin Dyer, directed by Stephen Colella. It's a astonishing three-hander happening right now at YPT, Young People's Theater, on the Ada Slate stage, happening now until May 2nd. It is for everyone. Yeah, see it, please. That's kind of where I'm gonna leave that. Okay, so sign offs again, grounding myself into the space. Ryan, where can folks find and follow your sniffly self?
You don't need to find and follow me personally, but if you like me and my theater thoughts, most of them tend to live here on the Cup. That's the show you're watching / listening to right now. We are at COH Theater on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube, where you might be watching this, and Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast and all the podcast places where you might be listening to this. Also, in the spirit of the Sorcerer's Apprentice that's living on your shirt right now, you might have noticed that there's another show about Disney that's happening in the city now that we are not going to run a review of here on the Cup, because I actually reviewed it elsewhere for Intermission Magazine. That's a public reading of an unproduced screenplay about the death of Walt Disney by Lucas Nath, which is currently happening at Soul Pepper, a co-production with Outside the March. I published my review in Intermission. If you want to know what does Ryan think about that show, don't sit waiting for a Cup episode. Just check that out. Maybe we'll put the link in the description. Maybe. No promises.
It's an astonishing review, so go read that.
Of an astonishing production, but we're not reviewing it here, so I will say no
fair.
more. How about you, Jill? Where can people find and follow you?
Yes, people can find and follow me at my artist Instagram account, Jillian.Robinson96. I have several projects on the go. I will be in Flair Productions production, A Goat, a Ghost, and a Guinness, happening at the Al Green Theater May 16th to the 19th. Keep your eyes peeled, maybe for some tangential advertising for that production. And also go to my page if you'd like to see more things about that show. And then I will also be in an upcoming new musical written and helmed by the astonishing Mateo Chavez Lewis. The musical is called Tommy Rhodes. It's going to be happening at Red Sandcastle Theater in June. So again, keep your eyes peeled to social page there if you'd like to come out and support. And there might be some tangential advertising for that show too. Yeah. So that's that. I'm going to finish my of my still warm cup of tea that's poured by my granddad's kettle or pot kettle. Yeah. And yeah, Ryan and I are going to breathe and try to come back outside of the shed into the real world. Speaking of real worlds, yeah, as Ryan mentioned, there's so much awesome theater happening in the city right now, folks. I feel like a bit of a broken record for past episodes, but spring 2024 in Toronto is boisterous when it comes to all of the phenomenal works that are on our stages. So go on out, put your butts in seats. There's nothing better than liveness and feeling the feels and going down memory lane. And yeah, theater does that for us. So support, support, support. And we will see you on the next episode of The Cup. Cheers.
Cheers.